For decades, the Hells Angels controlled Quebec's drug trade with one simple rule: pay us 10% of everything you make. And the system worked for years. But in 2023, a 27-year-old from Quebec City named Dave Turmel challenged the Hells Angels and decided he wasn't paying anymore. This rebellion was not new for Hells Angels, but Turmel's connection to Blood Family Mafia, a street gang that controlled drug distribution across Quebec City, made him hard to crush. Soon, a war erupted that forced the Hells Angels to do the unthinkable, ask police to intervene because their situation had gone out of their control. This is the story of Dave Turmel, a boy who declared war on the Hells Angels. Blood Family Mafia. For decades, the Hells Angels controlled Quebec's drug trade with a simple system. Every independent dealer, every street gang moving product through Quebec paid a 10% tax to the Hells Angels in exchange for permission to operate. The system worked because the Hells Angels had the muscle to enforce it. They'd spent decades building their reputation through Canada's brutal biker wars of the 1990s, in which more than 160 people died between 1994 and 2002, including 9 bystanders, as the Hells Angels crushed their rivals and established absolute dominance over Quebec's underworld. By the 2000s, the war was over. The Hells Angels had won, and every criminal organization in Quebec understood the rules. In Quebec City, a new street gang emerged in 2006. They wore red, adopted the style of the Los Angeles Bloods, called themselves the Blood Family Mafia. The BFM operated across eastern Quebec, Quebec City and its surrounding areas, the Côte-Nord region up north, and the Chaudière-Appalaches to the south. Street-level operations, cocaine distribution, methamphetamine sales. They weren't a major organization, not compared to the Hells Angels or Montreal's Italian mob, but they carved out profitable territory in the St. Lawrence River Valley. And in Quebec, profit meant paying the tax. For years, the Blood Family Mafia followed the rules. 10% of their earnings went to the Hells Angels, and as long as profits flowed and bodies didn't drop, the arrangement worked for everyone. For years, the system held. Then something changed. Turmel had been consolidating power, bringing multiple street-level dealers under the Blood Family Mafia banner. The more territory he controlled, the more the 10% tax cost him. According to journalist Pascal Robdidas, the BFM was leading a broader rebellion by drug dealers who had grown tired of paying what they saw as exorbitant taxes to the Hells Angels. They never liked working for the Hells Angels. The Blood Family Mafia had grown tired of giving away 10% of their earnings. They'd watched the Hells Angels grow wealthy off their labor, and under new leadership, they made a decision that would reshape Quebec's criminal landscape. They stopped paying. The Hells Angels had crushed rebellions before. They'd bombed clubhouses, murdered rivals, and destroyed anyone who challenged their authority. But this time would be different because the Blood Family Mafia had something the Hells Angels didn't expect: a leader willing to go further than anyone thought possible. Dave Turmel. Dave Turmel was born on May 3, 1996, in Lévis, Quebec, a small city across the St. Lawrence River from Quebec City. He was 18 years old when he first showed what he was capable of. In May 2014, a dispute with 2 men during a night out at a bar escalated into violence, and he stabbed both of them with a knife. Arrested and convicted. 3 years in prison. Most young offenders use their first prison sentence as a wake-up call. He used it differently. During his incarceration, prison guards discovered something during a routine cell search: a makeshift weapon, a sharpened object. That discovery earned him his nickname, Pick, French slang for pick or ice pick. Even behind bars, he was preparing for violence. After completing his sentence, another arrest in 2018, threatening a man with a baseball bat. In March 2019, police caught him with a loaded .45 caliber handgun. Back to prison for 12 months. By his early 20s, the pattern was clear: violence, weapons, intimidation. No fear of consequences. But he wasn't just another violent street criminal. He was ambitious, smart. While serving his sentences, he'd been watching Quebec's criminal hierarchy. how the Hells Angels operated, how they collected their 10% tax from every dealer, every crew, every gang. And he'd done the math. Control Quebec City's drug trade without paying the Hells Angels? The profits would be massive. Just one problem. No one had ever successfully challenged the Hells Angels in Quebec and survived. Dave Turmel didn't care. By the early 2020s, he'd risen through the ranks of the Blood family mafia. His willingness to do what others wouldn't made him a natural leader. And when he took control, he made a decision that would change everything. The tax rebellion. In 2023, Dave Turmel made his move and finally did what he had envisioned. The Blood family mafia stopped paying the 10% tax to the Hells Angels. The decision wasn't impulsive. Turmel had been planning it carefully. He'd consolidated Quebec City street gangs under the Blood family mafia banner, creating a unified force that could challenge the Hells Angels' control. The resentment had been building for years. Street-level dealers watched their profits disappear into Hells Angels' pockets. Young crews were tired of paying tribute to an aging organization. Turmel gave them an alternative. Stop paying, keep 100% of what you earn, and if the Hells Angels come for you, we fight back together. But Turmel knew he couldn't win this war alone. The Hells Angels had decades of experience, connections throughout law enforcement, and the muscle to crush any rebellion. So Turmel found powerful allies. He secured backing from the Rizzuto crime family in Montreal. The Sicilian mob had its own tensions with the Hells Angels. The Rizzutos and Montreal Hells Angels had begun butting heads at the end of the 2010s, with simmering tensions boiling over into full-blown war in the winter of 2023. The timing was perfect. The Rizzutos wanted to weaken the Hells Angels. Turmel wanted to destroy the 10% tax system. Their interests aligned. With Rizzuto's backing, Turmel had the protection and resources he needed. In 2023, the conflict began. The Hells Angels couldn't let this rebellion stand. If one gang stopped paying and survived, others would follow. The entire system would collapse. They had to crush Dave Turmel and the Blood family mafia. But Turmel wasn't backing down. Throughout 2023, tensions escalated. Then, in February 2024, Quebec police discovered something that shocked even seasoned investigators. Saint-Malachy, February 2024, a small town south of Quebec City. A man was killed and 3 others were injured during a hostage situation. Other people linked to the dispute had been kidnapped and tortured. Members of the BFM were arrested by the Sûreté du Québec police in connection with the kidnapping, torture, and murder of a man in Saint-Malachy. Quebec City Police Captain Marie-Manon Savard confirmed that 4 arrests had ties to David Pic Turmel, described as the leader of the Blood family mafia. The victim wasn't a Hells Angel. The Sûreté du Québec stated that the victim was not associated with the Hells Angels. He was a drug dealer who had decided to stop working for the Blood family mafia. He was invited to what he thought was a farewell party. Instead, he was subjected to what Quebec media called a night of horror. The victim was beaten several times and subjected to waterboarding 3 times before his feet were burned. His body was burned and his ears were cut off. This wasn't an isolated incident. The Bolo program described the conflict in stark terms. This conflict has been marked by sordid crimes such as murder and the use of the most barbaric methods of intimidation, including torture sessions and limb amputations, some of which have been broadcast on social media networks. The BFM had modeled its tactics after the Maras of Central America. Dave Turmel had brought cartel tactics to Canadian streets. The Hells Angels had built their empire on fear. They'd bombed clubhouses, murdered rivals, terrorized enemies, but they'd never done anything like this. The first strike. November 27, 2023, Quebec City. Michel Dooney Guerin stepped outside his home to shovel snow from his driveway. Guerin was a Hells Angels affiliate and the Quebec City chapter's main debt collector. He was the man who collected the 10% tax from street dealers. He was the Hells Angels enforcer on the ground. He was also Dave Turmel's target. Finally, the day came when gunshots shattered the quiet morning. Guerin was gunned down in his front yard while his neighbors watched. The message was clear. The Blood family mafia wasn't just refusing to pay the tax anymore. They were hunting the men who collected it. The Hells Angels had a decision to make: retaliate and risk full-scale war, or negotiate and appear weak. They chose neither option. Instead, they did something unprecedented. The Hells Angels' dilemma. The Hells Angels faced a crisis they'd never encountered before. For decades, they'd controlled Quebec through intimidation and violence. Rivals who challenged them disappeared. Gangs that refused to pay were destroyed. The system worked because everyone knew the consequences of defiance. But the Blood family mafia wasn't backing down. Quebec provincial police led raids in February 2024, arresting 21 people in a large-scale operation targeting organized crime. Investigators described a war over drug-selling territory spreading across eastern Quebec. The violence was attracting massive police attention, exactly what organized crime groups try to avoid. And the Hells Angels couldn't stop it. They couldn't crush this rebellion the way they'd crushed previous challenges. The Blood family mafia was younger, more reckless, and willing to go further than the Hells Angels ever had. Every retaliation was met with escalation. Then something unprecedented happened. The Hells Angels were asking police to intervene because they couldn't control the situation themselves. It had never happened before. Hells Angels chapters in Montreal and Trois-Rivières were not very happy because the Quebec City chapter had not settled the dispute. Internal pressure was building, and through it all, Dave Turmel kept escalating. The manhunt was intensifying, but Turmel had already planned his next move. He was leaving Canada and on the run. Summer 2023, Dave Turmel disappeared from Canada. Quebec City police issued a warrant for his arrest on July 24, 2023. He was wanted for drug trafficking, conspiracy, and armed assault, but Turmel was already gone. Police believed he'd left the country, but they didn't know exactly where he'd gone. Reports suggested Portugal, possibly other locations across Europe. What made Turmel different from most fugitives was this: he didn't go quiet. The violence in Quebec didn't stop when Turmel fled. It escalated. Turmel was commanding the Blood family mafia's operations from thousands of miles away, directing attacks, making strategic decisions, running a drug war from Europe while Quebec police scrambled to find him. Maxime Langlois, director of the Bolo program, explained the situation. Wherever he is, he seems to be pulling the strings on a lot of the things happening in our communities. For months, investigators hit dead ends. Turmel had resources, safe houses across Europe, encrypted communications, a network that kept him invisible while his war in Quebec raged on. Then, in March 2024, police made a breakthrough with international cooperation and tips from informants. Rubens Dennis, 31, considered by police to be Turmel's right-hand man, was arrested in Portugal. The arrest confirmed what investigators suspected. Turmel was using Europe as a base of operations. His network extended across multiple countries. Dennis's arrest put more pressure on Turmel as his inner circle was shrinking and police were getting closer. But Turmel remained at large. Back in Canada, the violence continued throughout 2024. Shootings, kidnappings, torture. The war between the Blood family mafia and the Hells Angels showed no signs of stopping. In December 2024, Canadian law enforcement made a major announcement. Dave Pick Turmel of the Blood family mafia became Canada's #1 most wanted fugitive. An award of up to $250,000 was being offered for any information leading to his arrest. Police forces across Canada and Europe were hunting him. Interpol had issued a red notice. A $250,000 reward was on the table. But for months, Dave Turmel stayed one step ahead until March 2025. The arrest. March 27, 2025, Rome, Italy. It was almost midnight when Italian police surrounded an apartment in Rome's Casalino district. Inside was Canada's most wanted fugitive. Dave Pick Turmel had been on the run for over a year. He'd evaded police across multiple countries, commanded a drug war from Europe, and stayed hidden despite a $250,000 bounty on his head. That night, his run ended.
Two officers standing in front of a table with several items, including a Canadian passport and a Quebec driver's license. Police say in capturing the 29-year-old, they also seized drugs, several SIM cards, and some sort of ledger.
Italian police announced they'd arrested the head of a notorious criminal organization who specialized in narcotics trafficking. Italian police said officers broke into the holiday home where the man had taken refuge. He immediately tried to barricade himself in, only to give in shortly afterward. Turmel didn't go quietly, but he didn't put up a violent fight. When officers entered, he attempted to block them, then surrendered. He handed the police a fake passport. The passport was under the name Sébastien Ménard Dumas. He also had a fake Quebec driver's license, 2 cell phones, SIM cards, and a small quantity of hashish. The elaborate false identity showed how seriously Turmel had prepared for life on the run. Multiple fake documents, burner phones, everything needed to stay invisible, but someone had given him up. According to sources, the informant was motivated by the reward of up to $250,000 being offered for any information leading to Turmel's arrest. Quebec police had received a tip in the days before the arrest. The information was specific enough to pinpoint Turmel's location in Rome. Radio-Canada sources said Quebec police officers received a tip about Turmel in recent days, which helped accelerate the investigation to locate him on the run in Italy. Someone close to Turmel, close enough to know exactly where he was hiding, had decided $250,000 was worth more than loyalty. The arrest was the result of international cooperation. Quebec City Police, Italian authorities, Interpol. Multiple agencies have been working together for nearly 2 years to track down one 28-year-old gang leader. Turmel is now in jail at Regina Coeli, awaiting extradition. Turcotte said the extradition process could take anywhere from 1 week to 6 months. Dave Turmel's war against the Hells Angels was over. The man who brought Central American cartel tactics to Canada, who posted torture videos online, who declared war on the most powerful motorcycle club in the country, and survived for nearly 2 years. He was caught in an apartment in Rome, betrayed for money, headed back to Canada to face justice. The war continues. Dave Turmel's arrest in Rome didn't end the violence in Quebec. It didn't even slow it down. All Boivin, 35, who police say is Turmel's close associate, remained the second most wanted fugitive in Canada. Boivin is wanted by the Sûreté du Québec for numerous drug-related offenses, including trafficking, conspiracy to traffic, and possession for the purpose of trafficking. The Blood family mafia structure hadn't collapsed with Turmel's capture. The organization he'd built continued operating. The rebellion against the Hells Angels' 10% tax continued. Even after nearly 2 years of police crackdowns, massive arrests, and international manhunts, the conflict shows no signs of ending. In December 2024, the Sûreté du Québec conducted raids and arrested 35 people across 15 raids in the regions of Quebec City, the Côte-Nord, the Saguenay, and Outaouais. Police say criminals of all allegiances were targeted, both Blood family mafia members and Hells Angels associates. Michel Patinaud, the Provincial Police Service's Chief Inspector of Criminal Investigations, made the operation's purpose clear. Today, we're sending a clear message. The SQ will spare no efforts in the fight against perpetrators of violence and drug traffickers. The crackdown by Quebec provincial police across eastern parts of the province quickly added up, with charges ranging from torture and mutilation to drug trafficking. Quebec Public Security Minister François Bonnardel made the government's position clear in an official statement. The operation showed the seriousness with which authorities were devoted to the fight against organized crime. Authorities sent a message to all criminal groups. We're going to go after all the people who commit these crimes, and we're going to take them to court. But the arrests keep coming because the violence keeps happening. Dave Turmel accomplished something unprecedented in Canadian organized crime. He challenged the Hells Angels' control over Quebec and survived long enough to inspire others. He showed that the 10% tax system could be fought, that the Hells Angels weren't invincible. But Turmel had proven a point. One 28-year-old with enough ruthlessness and strategic thinking could shake the foundations of Canada's most powerful criminal organization. The war he started in 2023 was still raging in 2025. And even from an Italian prison cell awaiting extradition, Dave Pic Turmel's legacy continued to reshape Quebec's criminal underworld. Dave Pic Turmel sits in Regina Coeli prison in Rome, awaiting extradition to Canada. He's 28 years old. He declared war on the Hells Angels at 27 and survived nearly 2 years on the run. The violence he unleashed changed Quebec forever. The 10% tax system he challenged still hasn't recovered. And somewhere in Canada, the Blood family mafia is still fighting the war he started.